country are voting today. They are forming political parties and choosing their leaders. And I will be proud of that South Africa than the one that was there before. Moving on, which part of the continent of Africa haven't you been before to say South Africa should be an exception? If you go to Lagos, there are poor people. We are not proud of poverty.
I've been to Nigeria.
There are no, is there any, how many white people are in Nigeria? You go to Ghana,
I've been to Kano.
if you read my book, you will see oppression, discrimination.
But I no disrespect to you. I'm not talking about Ghana. I was talking about specifically South Africa's symbolism of freedom seems to feel still sitting here as it was.
They've got freedom. Now what do they do with the freedom is about them. You don't want to see the kind of South Africa where some people, they want transformation. Effort is being made. Some of the farmlands are moving. Some of the industries are moving. There are more opportunities now for all South Africans than before. Hatred has gone down. People are working, they're even intermarrying, seriously.
Not seeing that, I'm talking about this one symbol.
And what we are saying, it may not be that immediate, but they are doing something. What I want to do here is going by what you said. In 1950s, you know, the African countries started having independent, I think Egypt was 47, a bit early. All the others, especially the black nations, those the dark skin, Ghana leading 57. When they had independence, they were here in this country. They were in America schooling. Some were in France schooling. So they know how things are done here and they want to do the same thing there. But what we don't ask ourselves was, why do they have to come here before the awakening? What we don't realize is that, and if you go till now, my book was talking about that, 47 or 50 something tribes, only in Ghana. Go to the Gambia, you can't finish counting them. Go to everywhere you go. Now, these are what was there before the colonial masters came. We don't have countries. We have tribal kingdoms. Some are very small. And maybe the environment encourages that. But that is not unique to the continent of Africa. It was in Europe too. It was in Asia. Maybe their environment allowed them to create larger states, larger kingdoms, like United Kingdoms. That became economically viable. In our case, it's not like that. Small.
Last question, Mr. Speaker, and then I'll see. Last question then on that point. Thank you for that. Thanks for your answer. It's an interesting debate, this debate. Do you ever see the townships of South Africa in the current process as you're proceeding with this new advancement within that part of Africa? Do you see the townships of Soweto one day going and being replaced with a better life for those people?
Well,
under a black controlled governmental system. I know it's not all black, I'm not naive with this, I understand. I'm just saying, do you see after Mandela, which was the idea that that would be a freer country and a more fairer country, that those townships will end for those people that have a better life? Are always going to be there?
I will always say one thing. The township you want, the kind of dreams you want, like when you go to Peckham, the shanties are being replaced with modern houses, right? If you go to Benjin, the old ones are being replaced by the new ones. It's all technology.
But they weren't selling South Africa, they were selling the shanty towns in South Africa.
Be patient. You see, South Africa cannot continue to sell natural resources like any country on the continent of Africa and import road building. Why should you import road building? Why should you import building of house? Now what are your people doing? Sleeping? So get that straight. We don't believe in selling raw material because that is the work in Ghana we call it the Gogginsberg economy. Give away the cocoa and then they come and bring one useless, build one street for you. Sometimes they build a church. and then they want you to go there and be worshiping God, or they build mosques.
That's another debate. Yeah.
Now, what we want to see, we don't want to see road pass through our village and we are still naked walking around. Nobody know who built it. Some company came from Brazil, then we'll be like monkeys crossing the road. We should build the road. When it's bad, we repair it.
But you don't.
But we don't. But we don't. But we don't. The reason why we don't, in 1960, you see, when the Europeans came, to me, they came to help us. Let me tell you why. They saw so many tribes who are fighting themselves. They needed people in America. They took them away. What did they do? Give the tribe weapons, give the other tribe weapons, give the other, because we are enemies. Fight yourself. Any slave you catch, bring it.
But
Now, be patient. Be patient.
Soweto is in my mind.
Oh. Soweto, we can't be fixated on Soweto. There are more problems than Soweto.
But that's how the ANC.
Do you know that people in Ghana, in Nigeria, are taking aeroplane by force to run and go to Soweto? From Nigeria, they want to go to Soweto to make a life. And recently they kill a lot of them. So if you think Soweto is bad, somewhere is worse than Soweto. So let us get things in perspective. You see, when the slave trade became unpopular, then the question is, what do they do about these people, the developed countries of Europe? Ask themselves questions. And they decided that the reason why you take people to America to go and work on the farm product taken to Europe to feed the industries, then the finished product taken to the continent of Africa, and then you catch slaves and take them. Why don't you turn the slaves into producers of those things they are going to produce in America? That is the idea of the colonies. So, but how can you get people to be productive when they are fighting themselves?
That's a great act. That's why
so you have to stop that war. They stopped the war and created the colonies. Then the colonies became our countries now. Now the colonies have become countries. So at least we've got bigger government. More population are now growing. We are no more dying like we used to die across the Sahara slave desert and so on. Because it was just since the time of the Romans, slave trade has been going on. Now our population is growing, but at independence we realize that the colonies, you don't get a donkey at home and one donkey to work for itself. As long as the donkey is yours, the donkey will work for you. So we are working for them. So to change that, we came out with the idea of the Organization of the African Unity in 1963. What we want to do is to create a United States of America, United States of Africa, and together we say no. Have we done that? Those in the north say they want to join Arab League. West Africa,
anyway, thank you very much for the answer. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So I can tell it to you as it is. Colonisation was the best thing that ever happened in the history of black people. And I can use this empirically by measuring the GDP of all black people. The highest blacks in the world, performing at $55,000 a year, are United States blacks.
United States of America.
Number one and number two by world GDP.
United States of America.
The Africans have squandered what was given to them. We all support Nelson Mandela for the free South Africa. I was in South Africa for work. The black municipal services, they put in local water meters, they charge you for the water, and they break down the pipes and they squander the infrastructure. This is South Africa Day run by black people. The only question is this: black self-determination, just to match US blacks, black people should have freedom for. But we must protect the 5 million white Boers under ethnic genocide in South Africa. Two South Africas, full freedom for blacks. You have your metric, 55K per year. We won't intervene, keep your resources. 5 million white South Africans being ethnically raped should be defended today. It's a humanitarian crisis.
Is it my turn?
Sorry, I will make it very brief. I am not a very good speaker, but I'm very practical. The problem basically is not about the color of the whatever, but the problem is between the poor and the rich.
Yes.
That's what the problem is. It's mainly these people, they think we are stupid because as he mentioned, in Africa. And they happen to be, I'm African too, yeah. And my country was under the French, was part of French colony. And I will tell you today, we are still French colony. The French, my people and the other African countries, they use them to fight against the Germans, you know. And you know how many soldiers killed in Morocco, for instance? About 40,000 Moroccan soldiers died in the World War I and World War II. That's only Morocco, okay? And they tell us fraternité, égalité, what do you call it? Égalité, fraternité, and liberté. It means brotherhood, equality, and freedom. Yeah? And they want democracy in France. You know, France, the symbol is fraternité, égalité, but that is in France. In France, and with French people, not even the people who they are not French, you know, or they don't look, they cannot pass as French, you know. So these people in their colony, in Morocco, in 1964, one of the opposition was killed by France and the Moroccan government in Paris. Why? Because he was a great mathematician, and he wants for Morocco to move forward, and he wants democracy, and he wants people to live and to keep away from, you know, and improving. They killed him. France killed him because France and America and all these countries, they don't want the rest of the world to improve and to move forward. They still want to sell us, and they protect religion. Can you imagine? I tell you, all this religion fanatic, not fanatic but they want people to carry on, not to kill people, but they want everything to carry on as it was before. They still want you, and they still look at you as you're not really, you know, and they still want to use you and abuse you and take all the resources, while they will let you sleep with the religion, and you are like, oh, you're having a problem. They don't, they say, and one thing I would say, please, and you know, when they colonized us, they made soldiers from Senegal, you know, to come and attack the opposition in Morocco. And the Moroccan, they send them to Vietnam and to kill each other. And that's how it works. This, you know what I mean? The solution is we need to be free. Capitalism and America is shit. There is no good example to follow as women, you know? And thank you.
Okay, this is a very short one because I'll come back when another topic comes up. It's about the Brexit Party. Do you know what the Brexit Party actually is?
Jesus Christ died on the cross, but he's no longer on the cross. He's now risen from the dead.
Way, my friend.
That's why they opened the tomb.
Jesus.
And when the earthquake rolled away the stone from the tomb.
Here in Hyde Park, there's a shortage of bread. As we watch the pigeons and the magpie through the short grass, looking, parading, chest out. Here we go. Seen a couple of fights, resulting in a couple of lost feathers earlier on. This one takes no messing. He's off. Here he goes. The remnants of a fight in Hyde Park over the bread. That used to be a pigeon.
Jesus Christ was no longer there. He had risen from the dead. He had ascended into heaven where he was before the world was created. Jesus Christ today is alive from the dead. Jesus Christ is the only one who has conquered death. He came into the world as man to overcome death.
Everything goes in the way it is. I believe that's pretty fair. I say it is unending.
If they get extremized enough, they will eventually exterminate others.
They have
Came into the world as man to swallow up death. God sent death. And why did God send death? Because of sin. It was a judgment of God on the world of sin. Jesus Christ. To abolish sin. Jesus Christ came to abolish death. That's why it was necessary that he was made fully man. That's why it was necessary that he was made. Like as we are, and yet without sin. That's why Jesus Christ took upon himself our humanity, so that in that humanity he would pay the penalty.
I want you to do with this over your wonderful hat. If I could ask you not to go shop when I film.
Right.
All right, I'm all ready. Take
Wait a
two.
minute, what's going to happen?
Be right on. Just
I'm going to write rhyme in that order, am I?
absolutely, please.
Okay. The rhyme would be right on. Sea, flight, gone.
Marvellous. Thank you so much.
Coherence, and when you become an individual, or then you isolate yourself from others, that, oh, look at me, I'm the best, I can do. And 17.5 million people have voted for 17.5 million reasons, and they're forgetting that so many of them blame what? Immigration. The top of the list was immigration. So the sovereignty, when you say sovereignty, so what do you mean sovereignty? No, I can engage with him.
No.
Oh, no, okay.
If he wants to tell
No, but I spoke about this. I spoke about the Brexit would happen because of the EU dictating the rules for Britain.
But no, they didn't.
Kind of did.
Okay. When the Brexit came to our parliament, it's our parliamentarians who are deciding to go out or to take the vote or to not. But my problem is that when people blame immigration and people blame that they don't have places for the school for their children, the indigenous people of this country having not this, not that. No, it's all about the austerity. 10 years of conservative government has been cutting. And the first thing, as a human being, if I get affected and my comfort zone is affected, the first thing I'll do, I'll blame somebody else. Let's blame the bloody immigrants. We are forgetting that in the past, this country benefited from other nations. The British Raj, the British Empire, when that finished, Britain needed people after the war to build this country. What they did, they bought the black people. Then if you know history, then why are you complaining about immigrants? This country by immigrants.
I've never experienced sovereignty. It doesn't exist in this country because we don't elect anybody of any influence. Second point, I come from Northern Ireland, a bit of an accent, where after 300 years of external interference, we sort of got our act together. We were starting to make a very positive future, bringing extremists together and making a positive future for people who live there. The Brexit, which was majority voted in England, has again created an impasse where if it leaves, there has to be a border, but we cannot have a border politically, economically, social. I was in a village last week, this time last Sunday, where you're in the United Kingdom and you're sitting in Ireland. Are we going to stick a border through that street again? It's thrown that situation into chaos, which is a great pity, a bit of a tragedy. Thank you very much.
All right. I think we should have a bit of a different approach to this. I think it's good to have different approaches to the same problem, to see it from different perspectives. Let's look at the European Union from the perspective of Portugal. I lived in Portugal most of my life. I do know about their history, about what's going on in the country now, more or less. Not exactly now, but when I lived there. Portugal had a very big gold reserve that was provided to them by their dictator, Salazar, which the Portuguese have mixed opinions about, because he was a fascist dictator, but he got Portugal out of an economic crisis like no one. So in the beginning, he improved Portugal, but eventually he got Portugal into a colonial war that Portugal could never truly, in colonies that Portugal could not maintain long term, so he messed up Portugal in the long term. But the gold remained, even after Portugal gave up the colonies. The gold, however, was all lost when Portugal joined the EU. Now the gold is nowhere to be found, and Portugal found itself in a very big economic crisis. And Portugal is one of the poorest countries in the EU right now, because they joined the EU and because they could not compete with other countries in the EU, and also because of the loss of their gold reserve. Another point, just because the EU is a union doesn't mean it's a good union. The Soviet Union was a union. There are many other unions that were unions, but were completely, that were terrible for the people who were part of the union. Not for all of them, obviously. Usually there would be one people that would rule the union and the other ones would just suffer. And lastly of all, I would like to give, to speak a little bit about sovereignty. When Ukraine had the mass starvation called the Holodomor, when we lost 10 million people of our population due to man-made starvations done by the Soviet Union, we started having a saying in the country, which is, if in the choice between bread and freedom you choose bread, you will lose the freedom and then you will lose the bread also.
Ideological viewpoint is derived from, I think you have to understand where the Chinese political system established its framework of operating. And that really was under Joseph Stalin's Russia. Stalin and his followers, and the continuation of Stalin, in other words, Khrushchev, Brezhnev, Chernenko and so on, these people argued that it is possible to establish some form of socialism, what they used to call real existing socialism, a practical alternative to capitalism, which would both act as a developmental state, able to advance the productive forces, the wealth in society, raise living standards, improve conditions, and compete in a peaceful manner with the West. And that meant technological, scientific, economic, and cultural competition. The economic was the key, and the scientific was the key. So a key marking point in understanding the dynamics of Soviet competition with America and with the Western world was the space program. In 1961, the Soviets sent a man into space. And then a second man circled the world 10 times in a spaceship. His name was German Titov. And this was just before the Berlin Wall was built. The Berlin Wall was built in order to seal up one section of the world, to isolate it and segregate it from the world in order to develop in competition with capitalism. Now, the Marxist view, in my opinion, takes class struggle as the starting point. So, the view of Trotsky, who was the opponent of Stalin in the 1920s and early 30s, was that revolutionary change had to infect the most advanced capitalist countries. You couldn't use... Sorry?
Ho means I agree with you.
Well, that's what Trotsky argued. And that therefore the revolution was a global process which would have to affect advanced countries, backward countries economically, and also raise the profile of the type of regime that you would like to see in existence. Not establish something based on the exigencies of the momentary power relations in the world. In other words, establish a dictatorial control and hold that dictatorial control in the name of socialism. Instead of this, everything should be done to maintain a regime that has better political rights, social rights, cultural rights than the Western capitalist countries. And because of that, there was a disparity between what the Stalinists wanted in the Soviet Union and what the Marxist thinkers wanted in the world. The people who tried to adhere to the basic framework that Marx had worked out in the early years of the Russian Revolution. How does that relate to China? The Chinese did this, which was correct, vis-à-vis the Soviet Union. They after 1979, they allowed private enterprise to operate inside China. That had a tremendously positive effect on the economic development of China. And contrary to what most leftists and Marxists in the world believed, it was a positive contribution to Marxist economic theory as well. And it went into line with the theoretician that I based my PhD on, is a guy called Preobrazhensky. Preobrazhensky said, in the 1920s, during the debate on Soviet industrialization, when there was still open and democratic and free thought expressed in the newspapers, in journals, on the radio, in the universities, you could freely express your opinion in the 1920s up until 1928 in the Soviet Union. So from 17 to 20, 11 years, there was freedom of thought in Russia. Not always complete political freedom, but freedom of thought was allowed. And there were two views about Soviet development. One view, from 1921 until 1928, was the view of one of the Central Committee members. He was called Nikolai Bukharin. And Bukharin had the dominant view, the majority view, inside the party. And his view was, allow the capitalists to develop, allow private property to develop, without any real limitations, because that will lay the economic basis for a development of the economy, and gradually you can create the economic foundation for socialism, and slowly take action to move towards a collectivist economy, raising funds from the private sector. The problem was, and this was the argument, the counter-argument put, and as I say, I think this is relevant today for China. Bukharin and his faction, which included Stalin, they argued that rather than allow, or better said, they argued that rather than take on the capitalists, rather than increase the size of the collective economy, you should allow what they called, they used to say the word, get rich is glorious. To enrich yourselves is a good thing because it lays the material foundation for socialism. because Russia was backward. They had starvation in 1921. They had cannibalism in 1921. Out of starvation. They had cannibalism in the early 1930s. So you've got to understand the context in which this revolution took place. It came out of the First World War. The people were starving. That's why they made revolution. They continued being, up until 1926, the economy was poorer than 1913, before the First World War began. Only in 1926-27 did they reach the level of production of 1913. So there you have to understand what the desperate economic condition was in Russia at that time.
Can I ask you a question? Why is it that so Marx would have expected the revolutions to be successful in the developed capitalist countries like France, Italy, Germany, Britain, really? There's four main ones. Why is it then, I'm interested to know, why is it that in the interwar period, it was Spain and Russia, the most the very backward economies at the time. Why was it that they were the ones who really had successful revolutions, and not the other?
During Marx's time in London, from 1849 till 1883, he studied the system of capitalism in the most advanced capitalist country, thinking that the development of capitalism in Britain and in Germany and in France would lead to revolution. First in France, then in Germany, then in England.